A millionaire widower hired an orphan as a nurse to his dying daughter, and having returned home 2 hours earlier, froze from what he had seen. Dear friends of the History and Destiny channel, before we continue, please write from which corner of the world you are watching us and how old you are. Enjoy the lecture. Unfortunately, we cannot offer you a position in our center, Sarah Elizabeth. The director of the clinic nervously tapped the countertop with his fingers from a natural tree. Avoiding a direct look, he sorted the documents in a thin folder, as if looking for confirmation of his words in them.
But why? Sarah straightened up, trying not to shake her voice. I have a red diploma, recommendations of leading specialists, 2 scientific publications. Do you see? The man glanced at her and immediately turned his eyes away.
Some people came to us, rumors, unconfirmed of course, but you yourself understand the reputation of the clinic. She understood. Oh, how well she understood. It was the 5th refusal in a month. The 5th polite, streamlined, cowardly refusal. What exactly are the rumors? Sarah asked calmly. I have the right to know. The director rubbed his collar on a starched shirt. They say that at the previous workplace you had a conflict with the management. It seems you were fired for unreliability. Sarah smiled. She was sick of this word, unreliability, as if a stigma scorched on the skin with hot iron. Thank you for your frankness. She rose, squeezing a folder with documents in her hand. All the best. London met her with a piercing wind and a small rain, typical for late autumn. Drops of drums on the umbrella in the rhythm of an obsessive melody that has been spinning in my head since the very morning. Sarah mechanically noted that the rain does not cause her sadness, but deaf rage, a typical reaction to suppressed stress. Unreliability. The brain refused to accept this word. Memories flowed in an unspoken stream. The office of the head physician of the psychoneurological dispensary. Late evening, Jenkins's hand on her knee. Salty look. Sarah, you are so beautiful when you are focused. You know, you could easily get a promotion. Her refusal. A cold smile. Well, it's your business. Just don't complain later. And then the harassment began. Small insults, sudden checks, missing patient documents, mistakes in the schedule. And whispers behind her back, oblique looks, colleagues looking away in the corridor. A phone call pulled Sarah out of a sticky memory cage. Arthur William appeared on the screen. I'm listening, Professor. Sarah, dear, hello. The voice of her former scientific director sounded as cheerful as ever. How are you? How is the search for a job? Without changes, she answered briefly, turning to her street. That's why I'm calling. I have an interesting offer. Don't refuse right away. First, listen to the end. In his voice there was a special soft persistence, which Sarah remembered well in her student years. This is how Arthur William convinced her to take up difficult topics which, in the end, brought excellent results. I'm listening. She pressed the phone, trying to cope with the yeast in her hands. After 5 refusals in a row, it is difficult to keep hope. A very wealthy gentleman, an old friend of my brother, turned to me. He needs a high-class psychotherapist for his daughter. The conditions are more than generous, but the case is, let's say, not simple. The girl is 16, has Asperger's syndrome, plus some rare autoimmune blood disease. Since early childhood, she has almost no contact with the outside world. Sarah stopped under the visor of her entrance, thinkingly looking at the wet asphalt.
And why did you decide to offer this to me? And to whom else? You have a brilliant qualification, experience of working with such cases, and, importantly, the professor made a pause. Now you are free from obligations. The last phrase sounded delicate, but Sarah caught the hidden meaning. You have nothing to lose. What do I need? To live in this person's house, to work with his daughter, to try to establish contact. The term is 6 months. If there is progress, the contract will be extended.
Sarah went up the stairs to her floor. The high ceilings of the Victorian house, the stucco, the massive door with a brass handle. This is all that remained of her from her parents, a small fortress where she could hide from the hostile world. Tell me honestly, Arthur William, is this charity you are trying to find me at least some job? The professor snorted into the phone. Who do you take me for, girl? I would never recommend a bad specialist, even out of pity. Charles Leonard is a serious person. He needs results, and I'm sure you can handle it. She put the key in the lock and stopped, thinking. Charles Leonard Spencer, the owner of the building resource, if this tells you anything. The name was vaguely familiar. It seems that something about charity flashed in the news. Okay, I'll think. Think faster. The professor humbly snorted. I gave him your number. He can call today. Having taken a shower, Sarah changed into her home clothes and tiredly went down to the old chair by the window. Behind the glass there was a view of the London roofs, illuminated by the evening lights. To live in someone else's house, to work with a difficult teenager, was it worth it after all that she went through? Perhaps it is better to file a lawsuit against Jenkins, to achieve justice, to clear your name. But then you have to go through the courts, journalists, retrials. She was torn by this thought. The phone rang so unexpectedly that Sarah shuddered. An unfamiliar number, but for some reason my heart beat faster. Sarah Elizabeth Watson. The voice in the phone rang low, confidently, with a light British accent. Yes, it's me. Charles Spencer, Arthur William told me about you. Sarah straightened up, automatically taking a more official pose, although the interlocutor could not see her. Good evening. Yes, the professor mentioned your proposal. Do you have time to talk now? Of course. I will not walk around. My daughter Isabella needs help. Her mother died in labor, and the girl was diagnosed with a rare genetic syndrome. A pain flashed through his voice, but immediately disappeared behind a business tone. For the last 2 years, her condition is deteriorating. All the doctors I have invited are divorced. The supportive therapy has no active dynamics. I do not believe this. Arthur William mentioned the Asperger syndrome and autoimmune disease. Yes, but I am sure that her closure is not only a result of autism. She is like... She came to her senses after the death of our housekeeper, who replaced her mother. It happened 2 years ago. Sarah made a thoughtful note. Psychological trauma against the background of neurological disorder, a complex combination. But there was a hitch. I offer you a 6-month contract. Charles continued. You will live in my house, work with Isabella, monitor her condition. Payment is £10,000 per month, plus bonus in case of positive dynamics. Sarah was almost shocked. The amount was astronomical compared to her previous salary. This is a very generous offer, she said carefully. But why me? Arthur Williams said that you are his best student in the last 10 years, and you also worked with difficult teenagers in a psychoneurological dispensary. Is this true?
Yes, she slowed down. But I must warn you that I had certain disagreements with the management of the last place of work.
I am interested in your professional skills, not office intrigues, cut off Charles. When could you start? Sarah looked at the wall calendar. Mid-November. Until the new year, 6 weeks. If she refuses, she will have to continue endless search for work, burning the last savings. I have to think, she said firmly. I need more information about the state of Isabella, the history of the disease. Of course, I will send you everything by email, but do not delay the decision. My daughter needs help now. After the call, Sarah sat still for a long time, looking into the darkening window. Thoughts were spinning in her head, work away from the city, from endless humiliation and refusals. An interesting clinical case, financial independence. But to live in the house of an unfamiliar man. She got up and approached the mirror in the hallway. From the depth of the old glass, a young woman looked at her with a tired but beautiful face. Emerald eyes, thin features, golden hair scattered on the shoulders. It was this appearance, which many considered her advantage, that became the source of so many problems. The decision came suddenly, clear and simple. If she wants to start from scratch and focus only on work, she needs to change her appearance. Not radically, just to disguise, so that men see in her only a specialist and not an object of desire. Sarah opened the closet and began to sort out things. Free jumpers, baggy trousers, shapeless dresses, what usually remained in the depths of the shelves, and also old glasses with simple glasses left after laser vision correction. The phone came to life again, playing a melody, fixed behind Diana, the only close person left in her life. Sarah. The voice of a friend rang with excitement. I was approved. Contract for 3 years, can you imagine? Milan Fashion Week. I'm leaving in a month and a half. Diana's joy was so sincere and infectious that Sarah smiled involuntarily. Dee, it's amazing. You deserve this success.
I arrange a farewell evening on the eve of departure. The last day of December. You have to be, you hear? No excuses. I'll try, Sarah frowned, remembering Spencer's offer. Listen, do you remember? You said you needed a model for the fitting of a new collection? Yes, and what? Diana responded quickly. Will you finally agree? Not quite. I need your help in something else. She looked at the inconspicuous things lying on the bed. Help me stand, invisible.
There was a pause. What happened, Sarah? There was anxiety in Diana's voice. Nothing special, just me. She stumbled, picking up words. I'm tired of the fact that men only see my appearance, not my profession. I need to change my image. Not for long. Is this related to a new job? Perhaps. Diana sighed. Okay, Goldfish, come in tomorrow. We'll figure something out. But keep in mind, I'm against your transformation into a grey mouse. Putting the phone down, Sarah returned to the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the city, in an old estate that the professor mentioned, a new life was waiting for her. And a girl who needed help. She opened her laptop and wrote a short message. Charles Leonard, I accept your offer. I'm ready to start working in a week. With respect, Sarah Watson. The young lady arrived. Sarah shuddered, getting out of her mind. The hour-long trip from London flew unnoticed. Outside the car window, snow-covered fields and cliffs were seen, and doubts were swirling in her head. Is she making a mistake, agreeing to this job? The driver, an unpronounceable man of years, unloaded her suitcases and pointed to the forged gates. Come in, they are waiting for you. A long alley of centuries-old faces opened behind the gates. Their bare branches, covered with indigo, formed a bizarre arch over the path. And at the end of the alley, Sarah involuntarily stopped, amazed by the open view. A 2-story building of light stone with columns, a wide terrace and high windows seemed to have come from another era. A classic estate of nobleman's England, surrounded by a winter garden. It was hard to believe that just an hour's drive away was a noisy metropolis. Welcome to Clear Springs, Sarah Elizabeth. A ringing female voice was heard. On the porch stood a tall, full woman with bright red hair, gathered in a simple bunch. Her wide face, with a sprig of sprigs, shone with sincere kindness. Margaret Eleanor, the housekeeper, appeared, going down the steps. Are you cold? Now we will warm ourselves with tea. She picked up one of the suitcases with such ease, as if it were an empty basket. Charles Leonard warned what would be for lunch. He entrusted me to show you the house and the room, said Margaret, leading Sarah through the spacious hall with a marble floor and an old chandelier. Oh, and we're all so happy that you have arrived. It was time long ago. The chandelier was completely closed and the doctors were only shaking their heads. Sarah noted that the woman calls the owner's daughter with a diminutive, affectionate name. Apparently there is a close connection between them. And here is Thomas. Margaret nodded at a tall young man who wiped the window frames in the living room. My son works as a gardener here." The guy with a strong physique and soft features of the face bowed awkwardly, clearly shy of attention. "Hello." About the chandelier, giving Sarah a shy smile. "Thomas is a natural person here." Margaret continued with maternal pride. "Every bush in the garden knows. It's so beautiful here in the summer. Charles Leonard specially invited a landscape historian to recreate everything as in the 19th century. They climbed the wide staircase to the second floor. The walls were decorated with ancient engravings in heavy frames and reproductions of paintings by British artists. "And this is your room." Margaret opened the oak door, letting Sarah go ahead. "Make yourself comfortable." "The bathroom is there." She pointed to the next door. "Lunch at 2 o'clock, dining room downstairs. If you need anything, call. That phone is connected to the kitchen." Being alone, Sarah curiously examined her apartments. Spacious bright room with a high ceiling and large windows facing the snow-covered park. Vintage furniture made of dark wood, a wide bed, a desk, a bookshelf filled with classical literature, a bouquet of fresh chrysanthemums in a crystal vase on the bedside table. She approached the window. Behind the glass lay a well-groomed park, snow-covered. In the distance, a glimmer of a frozen pond. The silence and tranquility of this place aroused a strange feeling, as if all the problems remained somewhere far away. Sarah began to unpack her things. Diana fulfilled her promise, helped her pick up a wardrobe that stole the dignity of the figure. Free blouses, closed cardigans, straight trousers. To this were added glasses in a simple frame and hair, gathered in a strict bun. "Are you sure you want to look like a boring librarian from Soviet cinema?" a friend asked with a laugh. But Sarah was not inclined. No attention to her appearance, only work. A light knock on the door interrupted her reflection. "Come in." A young girl slipped into the room in a formal maid's dress, fragile, with a doll face framed with chestnut curls. She threw Sarah a quick, appreciative look. Eleanor, a maid, appeared to her, slightly squatting in a humorous reverence. She came to find out if you needed anything. "Thank you, everything is fine," Sarah replied, noting a slight, unkind squint in the eyes of the girl. "Charles Leonard asked to convey that he was waiting for you in his office in half an hour." Eleanor corrected the snow-white apron. "To see you off? If it's not difficult." "Not at all." Eleanor's smile did not touch her eyes. "This is my job to take care of guests." "I'm not a guest," Sarah calmly corrected. "I'm an employee." Something flashed through the maid's eyes. "Of course," Eleanor murmured. "A new doctor for our Isabella." "I hope you will last longer than the previous ones." With these words, she jumped out of the room, leaving behind a trail of floral scents and a sense of unspokenness. Charles Leonard's office was struck by thoroughness. Massive bookshelves of redwood filled with ancient foliants in leather interweaves, a heavy desk, an antique chair with a high back, a Persian carpet on the floor. On the walls, pictures of British artists' movers and family photos. The host of the house rose from the table, greeting Sarah. For the first time she saw him in person, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sitting temples and piercing brown eyes. In his appearance, you could feel the natural strength and confidence that you can't buy for money. Sarah Elizabeth was happy to meet him. Charles's voice sounded just like on the phone, deep and thorough. "How did you get along? Does the room fit?"
"Everything is fine, thank you." Sarah appreciated the firm handshake. "You have an amazing house."
"Take a seat." He pointed to the chair by the table. "Yes, this place is almost 200 years old. The estate was built in the middle of the 19th century by the Spencer family. They are distant relatives of the writer. After the Revolution, there was a school here, then a sanatorium. In the 90s, everything came to nothing." I bought the estate 15 years ago and restored it, relying on historical documents and technology of that time. Sarah nodded, looking at the portrait of an old man in an old-fashioned fur coat hanging at the desk. "This is my great-grandfather." Charles intercepted her gaze. "The local doctor treated peasants for free at the beginning of the 20th century. Perhaps his genes responded to my desire to help children with developmental disabilities." He approached the old secretary, took out a heavy folder and put it in front of Sarah. "Here is a complete history of Isabella's disease, conclusion of all doctors, results of tests, observations of previous specialists." Sarah opened the folder, ran through the documents. "A rare genetic anomaly, a violation of the development of factors of blood clotting, pronounced autistic features. With age, the condition only worsened." "When did the first signs of autism spectrum disorder appear?" she asked, without tearing off the paper. "In early childhood, Charles came to the window looking at the snowy park. Her mother died in labor. Doctors could not save the complication. I was left alone with my newborn daughter, and..." He fell asleep, picking up words, could not cope. He was too immersed in business, entrusted the care of the child to the nannies. Isabella grew up closed, unsociable, but still developed. He turned to Sarah, and for the first time she saw pain in his eyes, which he carefully hid behind a mask of restraint. The real crisis began 2 years ago, after the death of our housekeeper, Hannah. Isabella was attached to her as to her mother. After that, the daughter seemed to have turned off, stopped reacting to others, went into her inner world. Doctors say that this is a protective reaction of the psyche. Sarah nodded, noting the importance of this information. Loss of significant attachment could be a trigger for a deep autistic regression. "I would like you to meet my daughter," Charles looked at the clock. "In half an hour she will receive medicine. You can be present at this." "Of course." "Sarah Elizabeth." He looked at her carefully in the eyes. "Yes, I have tried many methods of treatment, invited the best specialists. No one could reach her. You are my last hope." In his eyes there was such sincerity that Sarah involuntarily straightened up, feeling a surge of professional determination. "I will do everything possible, Charles Leonard, but I must warn you, miracles do not happen. Working with such cases requires time and patience."
"I have time," he answered with a bitter smile, "and patience. For the sake of my daughter, I am ready for anything."
Isabella's room struck Sarah with its helplessness. Despite the spacious room with expensive furniture and modern medical equipment, there was no presence of a living person here. No personal things, photos, books, nothing that would reflect the character or hobby of a teenage girl. Tightly pulled curtains did not let in daylight. The room was lit by a muffled nightlight that created a half-darkness. Isabella herself sat in an armchair by the window, looking aimlessly at one point. Thin, pale, with loose light hair, she seemed like a ghost. A beautiful face with the right features did not express absolutely no emotions. In the hands of a girl, she held a plush bear. "Bella, a new doctor has come to you." Margaret Eleanor spoke affectionately, correcting the plait on the girl's knees. "Sarah Elizabeth will deal with you." Not a single muscle trembled on Isabella's face. "It's time to take the medicine, my girl." Margaret brought a glass of water and a pill to the girl's lips. Mechanically, without changing the expression of her face, Isabella swallowed the medicine. Sarah carefully approached, watching for a reaction. "No!" The girl looked through it as if it were an empty place. "Hello, Isabella," Sarah softly said, kneeling in front of the chair to be on the level of the girl's eyes. "My name is Sarah. I would like to be friends with you." The answer was still the same indifference. Sarah carefully touched the girl's hands, cold, lifeless. Isabella did not pull her away, but did not react to the touch in any way. Is she always like this? Sarah quietly asked Margaret Eleanor when they left the room.
The last 2 years, yes. Before, even though she spoke sometimes, she drew. And now?
The woman sighed, briefly waving a tear. As Hannah died, so did Isabella, and closed, as if the soul left her. Going down to the dining room for lunch, Sarah continued to mentally analyze what she saw. Autism, complicated by psychological trauma, was aggravated by the mode of containment. A darkened room, a minimum of stimulation, the absence of daytime mode, all this only intensified the closeness. It was necessary to urgently change the approach. All the inhabitants of the house gathered at the dinner table. Charles Leonard is at the head of the table. To the right of him is the empty place of Isabella, who, as Margaret explained, always ate in her room. On the left is Thomas, who shyly studied the contents of his plate. In front of him is Eleanor, who kept looking at the owner of the house. Margaret Eleanor, as always, surpassed herself, noticed Charles, paying tribute to the exquisite dishes. She worked as a chef in a restaurant before coming to us, and she never regretted changing jobs, smiling at the woman, serving him borscht. Sarah watched closely the interaction between the members of the house, the domestic attitude of Charles to Margaret and her son, the obvious hostility between Margaret and Eleanor, hidden by polite smiles, the awkwardness of Thomas next to the young maid, in whom he was obviously in love, and Eleanor herself, beautiful, calculating, clearly aimed at a high position. Sarah noted an interesting dynamics. Charles Leonard, she turned to the owner of the house, I would like to offer some changes in Isabella's regime. I believe that she needs more daylight, physical activity, and social interaction. Charles put down the fork, listening carefully. I would like to open the curtains in her room, set regular walks in the fresh air, reconsider the diet, and also gradually include it in general meals. Previous doctors insisted on a minimum of irritants. Charles frowned. They said that any changes would cause stress. With your permission, I adhere to another therapeutic strategy, Sarah firmly said. Sensory deprivation can aggravate autistic manifestations. Isabella needs stimuli, gradual, dosed, but regular.
Sounds logical. Charles nodded slowly. Well, act at your discretion. I trust your qualifications.
Eleanor laughed but quickly disguised it with coughing. Margaret Eleanor looked at her sternly. Thank you. Sarah straightened up, feeling a surge of confidence. We will start tomorrow. Looking at the trustful eyes of Charles Leonard, she suddenly felt a heavy load of responsibility. Will she be able to help his daughter? Or will it be another disappointment in the line of specialists, powerless in front of the wall of alienation that surrounded Isabella? Doubts again settled in her soul, but Sarah drove them away. She had no right to failure. Not before this father, ready for everything for the sake of his child. A frosty morning greeted Sarah with a crystal silence. Snow covered the park overnight with a new layer, turning the trees into fairy figures. The clock showed 6 a.m., the perfect time to start the changes. She decidedly knocked on the door of Isabella's room. Without waiting for an answer, which she knew would not follow, Sarah went inside. In the twilight, the silhouette of a girl, motionless sitting in an armchair, was guessed. Judging by the crumpled bed, Isabella still slept at night. Good morning, Sarah said cheerfully, heading straight for the windows. Today is a beautiful day, and it's time for us to let a little light into the room. With one movement, she opened the heavy curtains. The dazzling sunlight flowed into the room, reflecting off the white snow outside the window. Isabella shuddered and covered her eyes with her hand, the first reaction in a long time. That's better, Sarah nodded satisfactorily, looking at the room in daylight. A desolate, sterile environment became even more obvious. She approached the girl and knelt down in front of her, looking into her face. Isabella, from today we have a new order. After breakfast we'll go for a walk. Then we'll do a little gymnastics, and for lunch will go down to the canteen. You will eat with everyone." The girl did not react in any way, but Sarah noticed that her fingers were clenching the plush bears. One more reaction, albeit insignificant. They knocked on the door carefully. Margaret Eleanor appeared on the threshold with a tray. "She brought breakfast for—" She frowned, seeing the open curtains. "Oh, Sarah Elizabeth, you have already started. Just don't overdo it. Bella can't worry." "Margaret Eleanor, from today Isabella has breakfast sitting at the table, not in the chair. And please bring her another clothes, something warm for a walk." The housekeeper looked worried, but obediently nodded and left. 10 minutes later, she returned with a warm suit and fur boots. "Charles Leonard ordered you not to cross anything," she whispered to Sarah. "But if something goes wrong, I will intervene." With these words, she helped Sarah put on Isabella. The girl did not resist, but did not help either, just allowed to manipulate her body like a big doll. Going outside, Sarah satisfactorily noted how the fresh, frosty air painted the pale cheeks of Isabella rosy. She held the girl firmly in her hand, slowly leading her along the cleared paths of the park. "Look, what beautiful trees are here," Sarah said, not expecting an answer, but confident that her words still reached the goal. "Spring here must be amazing. Lilac, jasmine, apple color." They walked around the park for the second round when they noticed Thomas clearing the path from the snow. Seeing them, he smiled embarrassedly and bowed. "Hello, Thomas," Sarah greeted him. "Can you tell me what kind of construction can be seen beyond the pond?" The Belvedere Gate willingly responded to the young man, rejoicing in the opportunity to show his knowledge. It was built in the last century, and during the war there was a hospital here. Wounded were treated. Charles Leonard said that in this very gazebo, nurses read letters to soldiers.
"I wonder," Sarah nodded, "what kind of flowers are planted along this alley?"
"In the spring, tulips will be here." Thomas's face lit up when talking about plants. "I myself wrote down onions, old varieties, which were planted during the Tsar's reign." Sarah noticed how he threw short glances at Isabella, in which compassion was read. Not pity, but compassion, an important difference. "Have you been working here for a long time?" She was interested.
"All my life," Thomas smiled. "As my mother brought me here when I was little, so I stayed."
On the way back to the house, it seemed to Sarah that Isabella was walking a little more confidently, as if the body remembered forgotten movements. After lunch, on which Sarah insisted that Isabella be present at the common table, she had a light massage session for the girl and then laid her down to rest. Entering the corridor, Sarah ran into Margaret Eleanor, who was clearly waiting for her. "Come to the kitchen, Sarah Elizabeth," the woman invited. "Let's have some tea, let's talk." The kitchen turned out to be a spacious room with modern equipment, artificially inscribed in the interior in the old way. In the center, there was a massive wooden table, clearly reminiscent of several generations of owners.
"Sit down," Margaret conjured over the kettle. "Well done, you are acting correctly with Isabella. She stayed with you longer than usual. Earlier on a walk, after 5 minutes, she was hysterical."
This is just the beginning. Sarah took a cup of fragrant herbal tea. "Margaret Eleanor, tell me more about your life here. How long have you been working at Spencer's?" Margaret sat down opposite, thinkingfully stirring the sugar in her cup. "For 25 years already," she smiled with some of her thoughts. "Charles Leonard, I can say, pulled me out of that world." She slowed down, as if deciding whether it was worth telling further. Something in the expression of Sarah's face apparently convinced her that you can trust. "I only ran away from the village then. In the 90s, everything collapsed for us. The farm was closed, there was no work, drunkenness and poverty. My parents died, my older brother got drunk. And I, a chef, dreamed of becoming a girl in a cooking school." She drank the tea, her eyes were clouded with memories. "A pregnant woman came to the city, ran away from her husband. He beat me terribly. no money, no housing, winter, outside. I was sitting at a bus stop, did not know where to go. And then the car stops. Charles Leonard saw me, asked, and offered a job as a cook in his house. He then earned only the first millions, bought an apartment in the centre. Margaret smiled, remembering. Thomas was born already here. Charles Leonard arranged me in the best maternity hospital, paid for everything himself. Then when he married Isabella's mother, we were already like a family. I was a little Isabella's nanny, and when Hannah died, she sighed. It was hard for him. If not for the job, he would have broken down completely. And his son? I heard that Charles Leonard has an older son from the first marriage.
William, Margaret nodded. Good guy, caring. Works in Vienna. The European branch is headed by his father's company. He should come. Thomas respects him very much, but Eleanor? She squeezed her lips.
What about Eleanor? Margaret lowered her voice, although they were alone in the kitchen. She dreams of getting married for William. She wants to show off when he comes. And she plays with my Thomas, but Charles Leonard has eyes, calculative girl. She shook her head. Charles Leonard is too kind. He picked her up from the brothel, you can say. There the police raided, and she cried that she was forcibly detained. Maybe it's true, who knows? Works well, I do not argue, but the serpentine nature slips. Sarah, understanding, nodded. The first impression about Eleanor was confirmed. And your son, he, in love with her? I rubbed my ears. Margaret sighed. Only she does not look at him almost, so sometimes she plays when she is bored. I talked to him. Yes, useless. You will not order your heart. Sarah finished her tea and got up. Thank you for your trust, Margaret Eleanor, and for the tea too. Yes, what is there? The woman waved her hand. I understand, people. You're a good person, Sarah Watson. The next 2 weeks turned into a real marathon for Sarah. She completely rebuilt Isabella's day regime. Early rise, morning gymnastics, walks, sensory exercises, musical therapy. At night, Sarah sat down until late, studying the latest studies on therapy of disorders of the autistic spectrum. In one of the foreign medical journals, she came across an article on the positive impact of animal therapy on patients with autism. The results of work with dogs of certain breeds were especially promising. For dinner, Sarah decided to share her ideas with Charles Leonard. The dog? He thoughtfully tapped the edge of the plate with a fork. Not sure. Isabella did not show any interest in animals before. In addition, given her blood disease, any scratch can become dangerous. I think about a breed bred specifically as a companion dog, Sarah insisted. Leonberger, they are large, but incredibly calm and friendly. Studies show that physical contact with animals stimulates the production of oxytocin, which is especially important when emotionally alienated.
Leonberger, you say? Charles's eyes shone with interest. It is curious that you mentioned this breed. Do you know that Leonbergers were bred in the 19th century specifically for European aristocracy? They were even called the dogs of kings.
This is how Sarah nodded, and this is not a coincidence. Given the environment of Isabella, the historical atmosphere of the estate, such a dog will fit into her world organically. Charles Leonard threw himself on the back of the chair thinking. Tomorrow I will call the breeder, he said decisively. If there is even the slightest chance that this will help Isabella, we must try. Thomas, sitting at the opposite end of the table, suddenly gave a voice. For the dog, it will be necessary to equip a place. I could make an aviary with an entrance to the garden. Great idea, Charles approved. Do it. Eleanor, sitting next to Thomas, playfully touched his hand. What an economic Thomas you are, she murmured. You can do everything. The young man smiled embarrassedly, red with pleasure. Margaret Eleanor unkindly shook her head. Sarah noticed this little scene and made a thoughtful note. It seems that the words of the housewife about the calculativeness of Eleanor were confirmed. The girl clearly kept Thomas on a hook, periodically nourishing his feelings. Leonberger's puppy arrived at the estate exactly a week later. Fluffy lump of reddish-gold wool with a black muzzle and smart brown eyes. Pure-blooded, with impeccable pedigree, he instantly conquered all the inhabitants of the house. "Lord," said Charles Leonard, when the little beast was still uncertain, stepping over his paws, examined the living room. "I think this is a suitable name." Sarah watched how Margaret Eleanor and even the usually restrained Thomas knelt down, writhing over the puppy. Only Eleanor stood aside, dangerously looking at the new inhabitant of the house. "I'm afraid he will spoil my shape," she explained, noticing Sarah's look. "Wool is so hard to clean." The moment of truth has come, the acquaintance of Isabella with the Lord. Sarah asked everyone to leave the room, leaving only her, the girl, and the puppy.
"Isabella," she gently said, lowering the puppy to the floor next to the girl's chair. "This is the Lord. He came to meet you."
The puppy, as if realizing the importance of the moment, carefully approached the girl and sat down at her feet, looking up from below. Nothing happened for a few minutes, and then what Sarah was waiting for. Isabella's hand, usually lifeless, lying on the armrest, slowly, very slowly went down. Thin, pale fingers touched the puppy's wet nose. The Lord licked her hand, and Isabella's lips trembled. Not a smile, no, just a shadow, a hint of expression. But this was the first emotional reaction in many months. Sarah froze, afraid to frighten the moment. Her heart pounded with excitement. It worked. She was delirious, the first breakthrough, the first real reaction. In the evening, sitting by the window in her room, she dialed Diana's number. Her friend answered right away, as if waiting for a call. "Sarah! Well, finally. I already thought you were locked up in the dungeon." "Sorry I haven't called for a long time," Sarah smiled. "There is so much work here."
"Tell me," Diana said demandingly, "how did your shutter experiment turn into a grey mouse?"
"Everything is going according to plan." Sarah caught herself thinking that she did not want to tell her friend about her new life. It was something personal. "How are you?" Preparation for departure. "Everything is super. The suitcases are almost packed." Diana was clearly delighted. "And the party, on the eve of the new year, is in full swing. I'm waiting for you in the mirrors at 8 p.m, and don't even think about refusing."
"I'll try to be careful," Sarah replied. "I won't try." Diana was outraged. "I'm leaving for at least 3 years. You have to see me off."
Sarah sighed. Really? How could she miss the farewell to the best and only friend? "Okay, I'll come," she promised. "I'll ask Charles Leonard for a day off." "That's great." Diana was delighted. "And yes, don't forget to dress up. No baggy sweaters and glasses. I want to see the real Sarah one last time." After the talk, Sarah looked out the window. Snow was falling outside, hiding the park with a white blanket. Somewhere in London, her previous life remained. And here? Something new began here, something that made her heart beat more often, but no longer out of fear, but out of hope.
"Of course. Sarah Elizabeth, I can't refuse you." Charles Leonard laid down the business papers and looked at her carefully. "Considering your success with Isabella, you not only deserved a vacation, but also a bonus."
Sarah stood in front of his massive desk, clenching her fingers to hide her excitement. In a month and a half of work, she never left the estate, completely immersed in the girl's therapy. "Thank you, but it's not about the bonus." She shook her head. "It's just that my friend is leaving for 3 years to Italy, and this is her last chance to see her." "I understand," Charles nodded. "Friendship is a precious feeling. Perhaps I will even give you a car with a driver so that you don't have to return by public transport."
"Don't, Charles Leonard. I would like to spend the whole day of the 31st in the city. Perhaps I will stay to spend the night with Diana."
Charles tapped his fingers on the table, clearly thinking. "Okay, but on one condition. You will return to the festive dinner on January 1st. On this day, my son William should come, and given the progress of Isabella, your presence is necessary." Sarah agreed with readiness. Over the past week, she has observed a number of positive changes in the state of the girl. Isabella began to react to her name, allowing her to massage not only her hands, but also shoulders, back. And most importantly, she established contact with the Lord, touching him and even watching his movements with her eyes. Leaving Charles's office, Sarah ran into Margaret Eleanor, who was already used to holding a tray of tea and homemade cookies in her hands. "Everything is fine. The housekeeper was interested. Charles Leonard let you go." "Yes, for one day," Sarah nodded. "Diana is arranging a farewell party before leaving for Milan." Margaret looked at her curiously. "And what, will you go in this form?" She nodded to the modest blouse and straight trousers of Sarah. "Or will you still show yourself to people as real?"
Sarah shuddered with surprise. "What are you talking about?"
Margaret smiled kindly. Her eyes were dazzled. "Girl, I worked in restaurants for 30 years. Do you think I don't see when a person is disguised, and your glasses are without diopters and the clothes are baggy?" She shook her head. "You can't hide beauty, no matter how hard you try." Sarah felt the paint flooding her face. "I just didn't want my appearance to interfere with my work," she awkwardly explained. "I understand." Margaret nodded seriously. "Men, they are like that, especially when money and power. They see a beautiful woman and think that she owes them something." She sighed and added more softly, "But you are young, beautiful. Why hide, especially from a friend? I'll help you iron your dress." Sarah laughed shyly, feeling the tension releasing her. "Thank you, Margaret Eleanor. You are very sensitive." December 31st met Sarah with frosty freshness and sunshine. She woke up with an unusual feeling of lightness and anticipation for the last few months. Today was the day when she could afford to become herself again, at least for a few hours. After the morning procedures with Isabella and lunch, Sarah went to her room, took out a carefully packed dress case from the closet and put on the bed a small makeup. The transformation was to take place. An hour before the mirror, there was already a completely different woman. The emerald silk dress created by Diana specifically for her emphasized a slender figure, a thin waist, and a beautiful shoulder line. Dissolved golden hair with soft waves fell on a naked back. Skillful makeup emphasized the expressiveness of the eyes and the sensitivity of the lips. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at her reflection. She almost forgot what it was like before, from troubles at work to exhausting search for a new job to the decision to hide her appearance. A knock at the door led her out of her mind. "Sarah Elizabeth, the taxi has arrived." Thomas's voice sounded muffled. "Thank you, I'll go down now." Putting on her coat the last time she looked at her reflection, she picked up a small bag and decidedly went down. A surprise was waiting for her. All the inhabitants of the house gathered to see her off. Charles Leonard, Margaret, Thomas, and even Eleanor, who could not hide the surprise when she saw the transformed Sarah.
"Wow." Thomas sighed, immediately confused by his own reaction. Margaret smiled broadly, clearly satisfied with the effect. Charles Leonard froze for a moment and then, surprised, bowed gallantly. "You are beautiful, Sarah Elizabeth. Your friend will be delighted."
Only Eleanor pressed her lips, retreating into the shade. Sarah said goodbye to everyone, promising to return for tomorrow's dinner, and sat down in a taxi. The last thing she saw when leaving the gate was Lord sitting by the window of Isabella's room. It seemed that even a puppy was looking at her. The Mirror Club fully corresponded to its name. The former income house of the beginning of the 20th century retained the amazing architecture of modernity with high ceilings and stucco. But the main feature was, of course, the mirrors, ancient, in carved frames. They adorned the walls, creating an illusion of infinite space.
Sarah! Diana's piercing look covered the music, and in a moment her friend already embraced her, admiring her dress. Finally, I thought you would not come. Oh, you put on my creation. And where is your librarian? Did you leave her in the village?
Sarah laughed, hugging her friend in response. Consider this my New Year's masquerade. She winked. Today I am turning into a pumpkin again. Well, no. Diana grabbed her hand and dragged her to the table where a cheerful company waited. Meet John, Olivia, David, Timothy. This is Sarah, my best friend, and from today, the official talisman of my career. Sarah smiled shyly, accepting a glass of champagne. Diana was always eccentric. The evening was full of conversations, laughter, dances. Sarah gradually relaxed, letting go of the anxiety and worries of the last months. She danced, enjoying the music and the freedom of movement, drank champagne, participated in toasts for the success of Diana. And this is for you, my friend, pulled a small velvet box for her, a gift for good luck. Inside was a graceful old brooch in the form of a swallow with wings, sprinkled with tiny stones. Diana, this is too valuable, exhaled Sarah, looking at the jewelry. This is Grandma's brooch, Diana explained. She said that the swallow always helps to find the way to happiness. She helped me get a contract. Now let her help you. Touched, Sarah hugged her friend tightly. I will miss you very much. Diana briefly wiped a tear. But you will definitely come to Milan to see me. Is it coming? Definitely, Sarah promised. Another glass of champagne, another dance. She did not notice how the clock struck 10. Hot, she went to the bar to drink water. What a meeting, our impregnable snow queen. She would recognize this voice from 1,000. Edward Maslow, her ex-lover, who actively participated in the trawl after the story with Jenkins, a tall, stately man with carefully laid dark hair and a self-contented smile. Hello, Edward, she nodded coldly, turning away.
Not so fast, he grabbed her by the hand. Long time no see. They say you are now listening to Rich Nannies. Did you find yourself a daddy?
He smelled of expensive alcohol and cigars. Sarah tried to free herself, but the grip was strong. Let me go, please.
And what? He giggled. Will you call your new patron? Or, according to the old habit, will you write a complaint?
There were 2 more men with him, obviously his friends. They watched the scene with interest. Meet my colleague, Edward waved his hand theatrically. Sarah Watson, our local fighter for justice. She loves old men in leadership positions and does not like when they ask for services, responsible services.
Are you drunk, Edward? Sarah tried to free herself again, feeling as if her cheeks were burning. Is it true that you were kicked out of the clinic for being unfit for justice? He asked, with contemptuous participation. Is it hard? Probably. When a diploma and protection do not help. It seemed to Sarah that everyone was looking at her. Shame, anger, helplessness, these feelings overwhelmed her with a wave. Circles swam in front of her eyes. Excuse me, it seems the lady does not want to talk to you. A calm, confident male voice sounded behind her back.
Sarah turned around and saw a tall, wide-shouldered man 35 years old in a strict suit. Something in his features seemed vaguely familiar to her.
And who are you? Edward frowned. Her new patron?
Just a gentleman who does not like when beautiful ladies are insulted, calmly answered the stranger. His voice did not sound loud, but there was steel in it. I think you better leave. Something in his gaze made Edward let go of Sarah's hand and take a step back. Let's go to Michael, he smiled tenderly. Let's not bother the wailing pigeons. When they left, the stranger turned to Sarah. Are you all right? I'm William. Sarah, she thanked and smiled tenderly, reaching out her hand. Thank you for your help. I do not know what I would do if you did not interfere. He smiled, and from this smile something in Sarah's chest trembled, Let me bring you something refreshing. It seems you need to calm down." They spent the rest of the evening together. William turned out to be a smart, educated interlocutor with a subtle sense of humor. He told that he works in the field of international financial consulting, travels a lot, and just returned from Europe. Sarah talked about her work as a psychotherapist, but omitted details about the new place of service. For some reason, she did not want to remember about everyday life on this magical evening. When midnight approached, they went out to the terrace of the club, from where a view of New Year's London opened. Snowflakes circled in the light of lanterns, and in the air smelled of tangerines and champagne.
10, 9, 8. A feedback was reported from the hall. "Make a wish," William whispered, leaning over her. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year.
Their lips met in a kiss, tender and exciting at the same time. Sarah felt as if the earth was leaving her feet. Something in this man, in his gaze, in his touch, awakened in her long-forgotten feelings, desire, passion, tenderness. Everything that happened next merged into a kaleidoscope of vivid impressions for her. A taxi taking them to William's apartment. An old house in the centre of London, a spacious living room with a taste of furniture, and his hands, lips, warmth of his body. On this night, she allowed herself to forget about everything, her fears, doubts, sorrows. Giving in to the impulse of feelings, she felt truly alive for the first time in many months. The morning found her in someone else's bed. Sarah slowly opened her eyes, recalling the events of the past night. There was no one next to her. On the pillow lay a folded sheet of paper.
"Dear Sarah, thank you for the magical night. I'm sorry that I left without saying goodbye. Urgent business. I hope to see you again. William."
She pressed a note to her chest, feeling a strange mixture of joy and disappointment. It was just a night, a beautiful, unforgettable but still accidental meeting, maybe even better. No obligations, no difficulties. Getting up, she put herself in order, called a taxi, and went home first to change, and then to get dressed, and then to get presents for the residents of the estate. By 5 o'clock in the evening, Sarah was already on her way back to Clear Springs. Charles Leonard warned her that the traditional New Year's dinner would start at 7, so she had time to unpack her things and get ready for the evening. Returning to her usual disguise, modest blouse, straight trousers, glasses, and a bunch of hair, Sarah felt a strange relief. This simplicity became a kind of refuge for her, a protection. Exactly. At 7, Sarah went down to the dining room, where all the residents had already gathered. Charles Leonard sat at the head of the table. Next to him, to the surprise of Sarah, sat Isabella, pale but calm, in a simple, light blue dress. Margaret Eleanor was patting around the table with snacks, Thomas was helping her, and Eleanor, unusually elegant with a high hairstyle, was laying out the dishes, and Sarah Elizabeth was greeted by her Charles. Just in time. "We are only waiting for my son. He must arrive in a minute." As if in response to his words, the sound of a car was heard. A few minutes later, a tall man in a dark suit walked in. "Welcome, son." Charles Leonard got up, hugging the one who came in. Sarah froze, not believing her eyes. William was standing in front of her, the one with whom she spent the last night. He did not notice her at once, greeting Margaret and Thomas. And when he saw the same amazement as it should have been written on her face, William, Charles Leonard introduced his son to Sarah. This is Sarah Elizabeth Watson, a psychotherapist of Isabella. She has just fantastic results. For the first time in 2 years, the girl shows signs of improvement. William silently looked at her, not being able to hide the shock. A few painful seconds passed before he coped with himself and stretched out his hand. "Very nice, Sarah. Elizabeth, Father told me a lot about you." Their fingers touched, and Sarah felt the shiver run through her body. God, how awkward. What does he think about her now? Will she decide that she deliberately hid her place of work? Or is it worse that she seduced him to get some advantages? Eleanor, watching their meeting, shrugged, clearly noticing the strange reaction of both. A smart, calculating girl could guess that something happened between them. Dinner began in a tense atmosphere. Sarah barely touched the food, feeling William's gaze on her. Charles Leonard, not noticing the strange atmosphere, told his son about the business of the company, the new projects of the fund, the successes of Isabella. "Isabella, look who has come." Charles Leonard turned to his daughter, "Your brother, William." The girl slowly raised her eyes, looking at the man sitting opposite, her gaze, usually scattered, suddenly focused. And then something happened that no one expected. Isabella slowly stretched her hand over the table as if wishing to touch William, and her lips trembled.
"Veal."
It was like a weak, unclear whisper, but everyone heard it. A deafening silence hung over the table.
"My God!" Charles Leonard exhaled, looking at his daughter with open eyes. She began to speak.
William carefully took his sister's palm into his. "Yes, Bella, it's me, I'm back." Something flashed in the girl's eyes, not quite a smile, but a shadow of emotion, a glimpse of life in a usually lifeless face. Sarah watched this scene with tears in her eyes. All her embarrassment, awkwardness, retreated before this little miracle. Isabella really woke up from her long sleep. When their eyes met over the table, William smiled to her, softly, gratefully. And in this smile, Sarah saw a promise. No matter what happens between them, it will not be just a random New Year's meeting. It will be something much bigger. The January morning was clear and frosty. Sarah stood by the window in Isabella's room, watching the rays of the rising sun dye the snowy cover a gentle pink color. The girl sat next to her, allowing her to comb her long, light hair, another small breakthrough in therapy. Before she categorically rejected any contact with her head, "Today we will try a new hairstyle," Sarah said softly, carefully separating the strands. "How about a French braid? You will look like a real princess." Since that memorable New Year's Eve, when Isabella spoke for the first time in 2 years, almost 2 weeks have passed. The girl slowly but surely came out of her constipation. Now she reacted to her name, sometimes nodded in response to questions, and even allowed herself to be hugged. However, progress with Isabella was the only joy of Sarah in these days. All the rest of the time she painfully avoided meeting William. After the first shock from the recognition, they practically did not talk in private. At the general table, both held each other politely, discussing only the state of Isabella and the weather. Sarah could not avoid confusion, recalling the New Year's Eve. What does he think about her? Does he consider her an easygoing woman who spent the night with the first meeting? Did he guess that she deliberately hid where she works? After finishing with Isabella's hairstyle, Sarah led her down for breakfast. At the canteen, everyone was already going to get wet, including William, who was reading the morning newspaper. When they appeared, he raised his head, and their eyes met for a moment. Sarah immediately looked away, feeling how the treacherous blush was filling her cheeks.
"Oh, what a beauty!" Margaret Eleanor exclaimed, noticing Isabella's new hairstyle. "A real princess!"
The girl did not react to the compliment, but allowed Margaret to sit down at the table next to Charles Leonard. "Good morning." Eleanor smiled and gave Sarah a cup of coffee. "I have no doubt that today you will do a miracle with our silence." Something in her voice made Sarah alert. A mysterious infidelity was hidden. "Don't do anything unnecessary," the girl added, leaning to Sarah's ear. What does she mean? Sarah thought for a moment. But Charles Leonard did not give her time to think. "Sarah Elizabeth, today I invited Professor Harrison," he said. "I would like to hear an independent opinion about Isabella's progress." Of course, Sarah nodded. What time should I wait for the concilium? At 2:00. After breakfast, she took Isabella to the library, where she had musical therapy sessions with her. Putting the girl in the chair, Sarah turned on the old potiphon. Gentle sounds of Beethoven's piano sonatas poured out of the sink. For the last week, Sarah experimented with various techniques, including using elements of folk medicine. Margaret Eleanor's mother was a village herbalist, and she preserved ancient recipes for calming teas and decoctions. Sarah studied modern studies of their effectiveness, and being sure of safety, included some in therapy. These methods were practiced by local doctors back in the 19th century, she explained to Charles Leonard. There are studies that confirm their effectiveness in neurological disorders. Her thinking interrupted the sound of the opening door. William appeared in the doorway. He apologized for the intrusion, he said, freezing on the threshold. Father asked to tell that the professor would come earlier. "Thank you." Sarah straightened up, trying not to give out excitement. "We will be ready." He took a step inside, carefully looking at his sister. "How is she today?" "Good." Sarah began to describe the morning's success in a professional tone. She allowed her hair to be combed, did not resist when touching the shoulders and back, reacted to her name. William watched Isabella with warmth in his eyes. At that moment, the girl turned her head and, seeing her brother, reached out to him, silently, but with a clear recognition. He immediately approached, carefully squeezing her fingers. "Hello, baby," he said softly. "You are very beautiful today." Sarah noticed how something flashed in Isabella's eyes, not quite a smile, but a flash of emotion. With William, the girl felt calm. Watching them, Sarah felt a strange warmth in her chest. William clearly loved his sister sincerely, deeply. This care for a loved one made him even more attractive in her eyes. As if feeling her gaze, he turned around. Their eyes met, and Sarah read a silent question in his gaze. She wanted to answer, wanted to explain, but the presence of Isabella made it impossible. "I have to prepare reports for the professor," she said, retreating to the door. "Will you stay with her?" William nodded, and Sarah hurried out, feeling her heart beating. Professor Harrison, a world-renowned neurologist, turned out to be a shy, elderly man with piercing eyes and a neat grey beard. He examined Isabella for a long time and carefully asked questions, studied Sarah's notes. "The results are really impressive," he finally said, taking off his glasses. "Such progress in such a short period of time." To be honest, I was skeptical, but the facts speak for themselves. Charles Leonard did not hide his joy. "So there is hope for a complete recovery?" "In such cases, you cannot give guarantees," carefully answered the professor. "But I recommend continuing therapy in the same way. Especially promising, I consider the combination of canistherapy with methods using natural means. By the way," he turned to Sarah, "your approach to adaptation to the work of earthly doctors is extremely interesting. I would like to discuss the possibility of a joint scientific article." The proposal was flattering, but Sarah only gratefully thanked the professor. After all the troubles at the previous job, she was not sure that she was ready to return to the academic environment. When the concilium was over, Charles Leonard hosted guests, and Sarah took Isabella for a day's rest. Returning along the corridor, she heard muffled voices from the library. The door was open, and Sarah involuntarily slowed down.
A dubious reputation was reported by the voice of Eleanor. "I heard she was fired for unprofessionalism. Who knows, will she not harm Isabella with her experiments? What are you hinting at?" It was William's voice, cold and sharp. "I'm just worried about the well-being of the family," the girl sighed pretentiously. "In addition, her behavior goes to the city for the night, returns God knows where." Sarah froze, clenching her fists. "So Eleanor is spreading rumors about her."
I wonder how far she will go in her insinuations. I appreciate your concern, Eleanor. Metal sounded in William's voice. But Sarah Elizabeth proved her professionalism with results. And her personal life has nothing to do with anyone. Sarah quietly retreated and hurried to her room. William's support was pleasant, but the bitterness of the intrigue of Eleanor left an unpleasant sediment. The next morning, when Sarah went down for breakfast, there was an oppressive atmosphere in the canteen. Charles Leonard looked darker than a cloud. Margaret Eleanor avoided meeting her with her eyes, and Eleanor hid a triumphant smile behind the cup. Only William, seeing Sarah, nodded politely. "Sarah Elizabeth," Charles said dryly. "I would like to talk to you after breakfast, in my office." Breakfast was held in tense silence. After finishing, Sarah got up and, taking a quick look at William, went to the office of Charles Leonard. He appeared in a few minutes with an envelope in his hands. "I received it yesterday without a preface," he said, stretching the envelope to Sarah. "I would like to hear your explanation." Inside was a letter without a signature, printed on ordinary paper. From the first lines, Sarah realized that the author was Edward Maslow. The letter contained a detailed list of her professional mistakes, unethical methods of work, as well as hints of inappropriate behavior with the management. At the end, there was a warning. Think whether you want to entrust the health of a daughter to a person with such a reputation. Sarah's hands trembled when she finished reading the letter. It was unbearably shameful to look up at Charles Leonard. "This is a slander," she said quietly. "Most of the accusations are completely fabricated."
"And the least?" Charles asked intrusively.
Sarah took a deep breath. It was time to tell the truth. At my last job, head physician Jenkins tried to incline me to intimacy in exchange for promotion. I refused, and the harassment began. Flattery, fabricated errors in the documents, setting up a team against me. In the end, I was fired for allegedly unethical behavior. She shook her hands, trying to remove the tremor. Well, I could go to court, I had evidence, but I didn't want a public scandal that would put an end to my career. So I just left and started looking for a new job. Unsuccessfully, rumors spread quickly. There was a long silence. Charles Leonard thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the table. "Why didn't you tell me about it right away?"
"I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, or that you would consider me a problematic employee," Sarah honestly replied.
He looked at her carefully, as if assessing the truthfulness of her words. "I believe you, Sarah Elizabeth," he finally said. "Moreover, I am sure that this Jenkins is a scoundrel who should be brought to justice. But I need to know whether this story is causing problems for my children." They knocked on the door and, without waiting for permission, William came in. "I apologize, Father," he looked serious and resolute. "I heard your conversation and I want to propose a solution." He came closer, standing behind Sarah as if expressing support. "I have a friend, one of the best lawyers in labor disputes. If Sarah Elizabeth has evidence of harassment, we can file a lawsuit and solve the issue in court. This will make the slanderers keep silent without unnecessary noise." Charles Leonard looked at his son with interest. "Are you sure you want to get involved in this?"
"Absolutely," William replied firmly. "I know Sarah Elizabeth not so long ago, but I am sure of her honesty."
Something in the intonation with which he pronounced her name made Charles Leonard look at his son first, then at Sarah. An understanding flashed in his eyes. "Okay," he nodded. "Act. I fully trust your decision. And yes, Sarah Elizabeth," he looked her in the eye, "your work with Isabella speaks of you better than any words." In the evening, Sarah sat in a gazebo in the depths of the garden. Despite the frost, it was quiet and quiet here. The snow sparkled under the rays of the sunset sun. The air seemed to ring from the purity. The crunch of snow under someone's steps made her turn around. William, wrapped in a warm coat, came into the gazebo. In his hands, He held 2 cups with a smoking drink. "Glentvane from Margaret Eleanor," he said, stretching her one. "She claims that it warms not only the body, but also the soul." "Thank you." Sarah took the cup. "I feel how a pleasant warmth fills me." William sat nearby at some distance, but close enough to feel his presence. "I wanted to talk about the New Year's Eve," he started directly, "and about what happened next." Sarah was tense, looking at herself. "I do not know what to say," she admitted honestly. "I did not know who you were and did not deliberately hide where I work."
"I believe you." His voice sounded soft. "And I want you to know that night was special for me. Not a random meeting, but something significant." He was silent, picking up words. "For the last 2 years I avoided relations. My fiancée left me not long before the wedding, preferring a richer fan. Since then I have closed, did not allow myself to feel."
Sarah turned to him for the first time in the whole conversation, looking right in the eyes. "And that night?" she asked quietly. "That night something changed," he simply replied. "I saw a woman who needed protection but at the same time was strong and proud. This awakened something in me." He carefully covered her hand with his. "And then I found out that you work for my father, and that thanks to you my sister began to leave her state. It seemed to me such an incredible coincidence that I was confused. I did not know how to approach, what to say." Sarah looked at their joined hands. His palm was warm and reliable. "I was also confused," she admitted, "and embarrassed. It seemed to me you could think that I—"
"What was it?"
Not for a second he gently squeezed her fingers. "What was between us was sincere. I felt it then, and I feel it now." Sarah looked up. Warmth shone in his eyes, which melted the ice of uncertainty in her heart. "I do not know what will happen next," she said. "My job, Isabella."
"I do not ask anything, and I am not in a hurry. I just want you to know I have deep feelings for you, and I'm ready to wait as long as it takes."
She silently nodded, feeling how warmth was pouring inside, having nothing to do with Glentvane. Despite all the fears and doubts, despite the attempt to close from the world, something new and bright awoke in her soul. It was like spring that came in the middle of winter. The May morning filled the garden with clear springs, with the scent of lilac and apple-coloured water. Sarah sat on a bench by the pond, watching Isabella draw with watercolours the dissolved tulips. Next to her was sleeping an adult lord, no longer a puppy, but an impressive dog with thick golden fur. 5 months passed, 5 months of daily work, small victories, and wonderful discoveries. Isabella changed beyond recognition. Now she spoke simple phrases, ate on her own, was interested in music and drawing. In her eyes, before lifeless, a spark of curiosity appeared. "Beautiful?" asked the girl, lifting the album and showing Sarah her work.
"Very beautiful," Sarah answered sincerely. "You are a real artist."
Isabella smiled with a real, open smile. These moments still caused a lump in Sarah's throat. Every smile, every word of the girl was precious.
"Dad, soon?" asked Isabella, putting down her brush.
"Yes, William, and they must return for lunch." Sarah nodded, looking at the clock. Today was a special day, a day when the results of a difficult legal confrontation lasted several months. William, faithful to his promise, attracted the best lawyers to restore Sarah's reputation. The result exceeded all expectations. Former head Jenkins was brought to justice for harassment, and Edward Maslow was forced to apologize publicly for the slander.
"Sarah Elizabeth!" Margaret Eleanor's voice interrupted her reflection. "You to the phone," William calls.
Sarah got up, leaving Isabella under the watch of the Lord, and hurried to the house. During these months, the estate became a real home for her, and her inhabitants a family. Everything went well. William's voice in the phone sounded cheerful. Jenkins admitted his guilt and agreed to compensation. Maslow apologized. Your professional reputation is fully restored.
Thank you. Sarah covered her eyes, feeling a heavy load fall from her shoulders. This is so important to me.
I know. He is a leading specialist in the rehabilitation of patients with Asperger's syndrome. He was interested in Sarah's techniques and offered a consultation. He turned to Sarah. I thought we could go with Isabella in July for a month or two. Sarah was surprised to see Charles Leonard. Do you agree to let Isabella go so far?
I trust you both, he simply replied. In addition, this is a chance for her to get better treatment. And he also smiled cunningly. A good opportunity for the two of you to spend time together, away from curious eyes.
Sarah felt the paint fill her cheeks. Relationships with William were not a secret, but such an open approval of Charles Leonard was a surprise for her. After lunch, everyone went to the garden. The day was warm, windless. Thomas prepared a plot for planting a tree. This family tradition of the Spencers dates back to the past. Every significant event in our family is celebrated by planting a tree, Charles Leonard explained. My great-grandfather planted maple trees in honor of the birth of his children. My grandfather planted an oak alley, marking the end of the war. I planted a cherry orchard when Isabella was born. He brought Sarah and William to the young seedling of the oak. Today I want you to plant this tree together, a symbol of a new beginning. They looked over, understanding the deep meaning of this gesture. Together, side by side, they lowered the seedling into a prepared pit, carefully spread the roots, covered it with fertile soil. Their hands touched, and Sarah felt the invisible energy of trust and love flow between them. When the tree was planted, Charles Leonard called Sarah. I have something for you. He took out a small velvet box from his pocket. It belonged to my mother. Now I would like it to belong to you. Inside was an old ring with emeralds surrounded by small diamonds. Sarah gasped with surprise. Charles Leonard, I can't. You can, he said softly. You have returned my daughter's life and the happiness to my son. You have become part of our family, Sarah. He took her hand and squeezed it into his palms. I see in you not only Isabella the Savior, but also a worthy companion for William, and I hope that someday I will be able to call you my daughter. Tears rolled down Sarah's eyes. For her life, she lost so much: parents, faith in people, hope for happiness. And now, thanks to the chain of seemingly random events, she found a new family, love, a business that brought joy. Isabella, watching the ceremony of planting the tree, suddenly approached him. In her hand, she held her album. She drew, she said, stretching it to Sarah and William. The drawing depicted a house, a manor house, clear pond surrounded by trees. And around the house there were figures of people holding hands. Charles Leonard, Isabella, William, Sarah, Margaret, Thomas, Eleanor, and even Lord. Above the drawing were drawn in uneven letters, My Family. Sarah hugged the girl, not hiding tears of happiness. William put his hand on his sister's shoulder, and his eyes also shone suspiciously. Isabella suddenly smiled, wide, bright, and said unexpectedly clearly, We are all angels of good. These words, spoken by a voice of a recently silent girl, sounded like a blessing. As a confirmation that the circle was closed, the circle of pain, loneliness, and fear turned into a circle of love, support, and hope. Sarah looked at William, at his warm smile, at their intertwined fingers. Past fears were dissolved, giving way to confidence. She was no longer afraid to love and be loved. In this garden, among the blooming flowers under the shade of 100-year-old trees, a new stage of her life began, life filled with meaning, joy, and true love. Here, in the estate of Clear Springs, she finally found her home. This is how the story of how love and care can create real miracles came to an end. If you like the story, please like it and share the story with your friends. We are sure that this story will also give warmth and hope to some of your loved ones. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where new stories are waiting for you, which we create with love and care for each listener. Thank you for being with us. See you soon.